Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration and growth. Today I have the pleasure and the privilege to be speaking with a truly extraordinary individual. He's a high-end performance coach for peak performance, an international public speaker, a facilitator for Tony Robbins events, and he has a mission of changing lives, healing hearts, and helping transform global consciousness. Allan Kleynhans, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to have you here.
Aggie, thank you so much, my man. It's great to be with you, my friend.
It's a real pleasure, and I wanted to start straight away, Allan, with something about your background, personal story. I know you have a very fascinating story, but I want to give us a couple of key defining moments or milestones in terms of your own story and personal development.
Okay. Well, I guess the story that I tell people is how I grew up in South Africa. And, I grew up in very racist South Africa. It was very segregated. There was a lot of apartheid. There was a massive difference between white and black. I was born in 1966. And I think the very first thing that really impacted me as a young boy when I was only four and a half years of age was I lived next door to a police station. And it was a very, very tough neighborhood that I lived in. One of the toughest neighborhoods in my city, probably recognized as the toughest neighborhood in the city at that time, And I lived next door to a police station, and that really impacted my psyche because I used to, be very aware of what was happening in the police yard next door. In fact, I used to climb on the wall and have a look over the wall and see what was going on there. And, I saw some things that were pretty horrific. And, we all experience trauma as kids. When you learn about trauma and you learn about, the human psyche and how it's affected by experiences as young children, we're all affected by what's happening around us. And then there's different levels of intensity when it comes to trauma. So there was would have definitely had an impact on my psyche. And then, I was sent away to boarding school. I was the kind of kid that wasn't academic, but my parents wanted me to have a good education. So they paid for a private education, which I wasted, much to their dismay. They never let me forget about the fact that my education was costing them a fortune. Mm-hmm. And that's basically all they ever did they really, their main outcome for me was to have a great education, because both of them, my father left school at 12 years of age. So he had to go back to college when he was much older to get some kind of education, and he got a degree in engineering. But he wanted me to have a very different education. So he paid for a private education. And I wasn't academically minded. I was a kind of like an E student. I got E for enough. I often joke that I got E for enough. I just made it through. And, But again, throughout my whole youth, I was a kind of kid that was always felt like I was on the outside. I was bullied a lot. I was picked on a lot. I was teased a lot, teased a lot about my physical appearance. I was told I was ugly all the time. I had I was told I had a flat nose all the time. And so what I did was at a young age, I learned to be funny, and so because I figured that if I was funny, I could make people laugh, then they would accept me. And so that was that was kind of like my winning formula as a young child. It's like, let me make people laugh,
Mm-hmm.
And so I developed, quite a quick wit, etc. And, the gift of the gab in terms of making people laugh. But once I left boarding school, I went to the military, and I think that's where, my life changed dramatically because of it shaped me, in terms of my psyche, because I had post-traumatic stress when I came back from the military. I was deployed in Angola for 7 months during 1987. And there was a civil war raging there for many years. Many, many, many people lost their lives. And South Africa was deployed in that war. And we were there in a covert fashion, which means that we weren't not allowed to be there. We were sworn to secrecy. Nobody really knew South Africa was there until, the early 90s, 1991, 92, when it was on the international news. And it came to light. However, we had been there for a long time. In 87, I was there for 7 months, and I was, part of a unit. There were 5,000 soldiers. I was trained to use a patrol mortar pipe and an RPG-7 rocket launcher. And, it was close combat. It was very, very intense. It was brutal and horrific. And I lost a lot of friends. And I came back from that traumatized. I had nightmares for 7 years. And, I had post-traumatic stress for about 9 years. I was always angry. After that, I was drinking a lot, taking a lot of drugs. I started to take LSD and, ecstasy and drugs like that. And I was smoking marijuana all the time. And I was drinking a lot too. But my saving grace, which is what brought me to the point that I am at now, it's been a long journey, 32 years later. But at 21 years of age, I'd been out of the military for 6 months. And, I was in a very dark place. And I was very unhappy. And I was secluded in my own bedroom. I used to kind of just stay in my own bedroom, I stayed in my bedroom for 6 months really. And, I never really came out. And I didn't like to, I wasn't very comfortable in general civilian public places. And but my saving grace was the fact that I bumped into a good friend of mine. His name was Malcolm. And he was the one who introduced me to inspirational literature. He was the one who recommended I read Think and Grow Rich. And he had all these books in his flat. And so I started hanging around with him a lot. And, I was in his flat a lot and I was reading all the time. And that was 21 years of age, July of 1988 was the first time I opened Think and Grow Rich. And that was when I became a student for the first time, actually. I say to people, that was the day I became a student because I was actively involved in what I was reading. I was absorbing it. I was mesmerized by it. I was fascinated by it. And I'd never, ever felt that way reading a book before that. Any book, any textbook at school. I never had the intention of ever opening another book once I left school. I was so happy to be out of school when it was over. But that day of, July of 1988, when I opened that book, Think and Grow Rich, it only took me a few pages to realize that I was absorbed totally in the book. And I haven't stopped reading since, and that led to a long journey, and I eventually left South Africa. But after I'd read many, many books that Malcolm had in his flat, and I arrived in London, and my first book that I bought in London was Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins.
All right. Okay.
That was my first introduction to Tony at 1990. It was March of 1990. That was also my first introduction to NLP. And, and then I came across Landmark Education, went through the whole Landmark curriculum, did the forum, the advanced course, the self-expression and leadership program, the communication courses, ended up doing the forum leaders program and was going to be the forum leader for South Africa. It was my intention. That was the intention at the end of the training. But at the end of the training, I decided to change directions and I ended up in a UPW program with Tony, Unleash the Power Within in Cardiff, Wales. It was July of 1999, again, a July month. And that was a turning point for me because in 1999, I had absorbed so much information. And I ask people all the time, in audiences especially, I say, raise your hand if you believe knowledge is power. And everybody raises their hand. And I always say to them, that's BS, it's total BS. It's and that could mean bullshit or a belief system, right?
Yeah.
But people have the belief system that knowledge is power, but we absorb knowledge. The average person absorbs knowledge and doesn't really do anything with it. So, knowledge is only potential power. We have to actually act on it. And I had a head full of knowledge. I developed a very good memory, but I wasn't doing anything with it. So in 1999, when I went to see Tony for the first time in Unleash the Power Within, it was in Cardiff, Wales. I was frustrated. I was unhappy. I was very angry. I was suicidal. In fact, at that time, I was abusing, substance abuse. I was taking drugs all the time. I was drinking all the time, smoking cigarettes, smoking marijuana, taking ecstasy and going out all the time because I was in a crazy eight. I was trying to, there was stuff that I hadn't dealt with, in my psyche. There was trauma that I hadn't dealt with and I just kind of suppressed it. And in spite of the fact that I'd absorbed this information and been to all these programs, I wasn't actually doing anything with it. I wasn't really growing, I was stagnant in my life and I was frustrated by the fact that I wasn't growing and that I was in this crazy eight. And
so how did that Tony Robbins experience in UPW change that for you?
Well, it was so powerful. I had been listening to Tony for 9 years on cassette tape by that point. And I'd listened to so many different programs, but Tony's voice, Tony's got a great voice and it was just a great anchor. And then when I got to the program and I was there live and I saw him live on stage as soon as he came on stage, within the first, few seconds, it was just he was so powerful, so obviously powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And the process of that program, the process of that 4 days, the processes during those 4 days, the interactive experiences, especially on the third day. It was the third day that we went through this program, or this particular process, I should say, is the right word. The process is like a 4-hour process. I don't want to say anything about it because there may be people here who want to do the UPW program with Tony, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's such a powerful process. And that was for me, that was like, just change everything for me, because I came out of that process afterwards. And in those days, Tony used to take shares, after that process. And I happened to get the microphone at that point, and I shared with Tony, in front of 1,500 people the first time. For the first time in my life, what I'd been carrying with me in terms of shame and guilt, the shame I'd been carrying with me, the guilt that I'd been carrying with me because of that experience that I had in Angola, where
Mm-hmm.
that I was part of that, war does change men, it changes people. War, not only men, it changes women and men, children, because there are women, men and children involved in war-torn countries and war-torn environments. But it definitely changes people. And I hadn't realized how deeply had it affected me, and how, how much trauma, I had been carrying until that moment. And then that experience really helped me to release that. And it changed the way I believed my life could go, it changed the way I saw myself. It changed the way I saw my future, completely.
Mm-hmm.
Because before that, my future was very bleak. I didn't really, I was just getting through the day, and but that experience, it was really powerful. And then I managed to, I got the microphone, I shared with Tony, I told him, how powerful that experience had been for me. And I shared in front of 1,500 people for the first time in public. I shared what I'd done in Angola, what I'd been through, and how relieved I felt, that I had been in that experience. And what I could see now for myself was there was light at the end of the tunnel. And after those 4 days, my life went in a totally different direction, and a dramatic shift occurred. And that's when I began to really practice all the things I'd been learning. And over the next 4 years, it was amazing. 4 years later, I found myself in South Africa. I was making a difference. I was speaking. I was running workshops. I was working with big companies. I worked with the Sharks rugby team, which is a top rugby team in South Africa. They had Springbok rugby players in that team. So these were, people that represented South Africa at the highest level in terms of rugby. I was working with that team for a season. It was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Everything changed, after that. And, I tell people all the time, Aggie, we all experience trauma as children. We don't realize it. We experience it from a youngest age. Sometimes we even experience our mother's trauma while we're in our mother's womb.
Mm-hmm.
That happens often because the energy of the mother is transmitted to the child. So our job while we're alive as human beings is to heal ourselves, and heal our trauma, because then we can show up as more authentic human beings. We're all trying to hide our real selves from the world, and we're all putting on a false self. We've all got these facades and these masks, and social media helps us to do that,
Mm-hmm.
in strange ways, because we can put our best life online.
Allan, you have opened up so many threads at the same moment now.
Yeah.
So, there are actually some things that I wanted to ask in more particular about some things you said.
Ask me.
But I'll go back quickly to what you said, that you don't want to spoil for Tony Robbins, people that want to go to the event.
Yeah.
It's not secret, because I've shared it in the past, that the Dickens process on the third day transformed me as well. So it turned me from an introvert person that would not speak to anyone because I was afraid of their judgment of me, to someone that started doing public speaking, a podcast, and so it is very transformational indeed.
Absolutely, it's a and anyone, like you say, it's called the Dickens process, and it's absolutely transformational. It's such a powerful process.
And how did you go then from that first UPW to your role into being a trainer and a senior trainer with Tony Robbins?
I'm not a senior trainer. I'm a trainer. I'm one of Tony Robbins' trainers.
Oh, okay.
But what I did was I when I went at that first UPW, I decided, right there and then that I wanted to do all the programs that Tony offered. So I registered for Mastery University, which is Date with Destiny, Life and Wealth Mastery. And then I went to the Leadership Academy, and I looked around and I saw people that were wearing, at the time, they used to wear red shirts and it said Tony Robbins trainer on their chest. And I thought, wow, what it must be to be part of a peer group like that. What a peer group. Imagine that, to be a Tony Robbins trainer. And obviously, Tony's standards are exceptionally high, and it's a fantastic peer group. And over the years, I went through the leadership program, and there's something called the senior leadership program. Then what happens is, once you come out of leadership mastery, and you enter the senior leadership program, and then you keep showing up in a leadership capacity, demonstrating your skills and demonstrating your ability to use the tools that Tony teaches at Leadership Academy. And then you get promoted to trainer, and so when that day came for me, it was like, I'd forgotten that I set that goal a long time ago. I'd forgotten that I had that dream, and then I was just in the process of serving, and that's what I think, that's always been my intention, is to really serve and make a difference. Even from a young age, I always wanted to make people feel good. I always wanted to, kindness has always been important to me. My father always taught me about kindness. He was a very kind man, my father. Everybody loved him because of the fact that he was he was so kind and popular because of that fact. So I learned that from him. And, then when I was promoted to trainer, it was wow, it was fantastic. It was it's a highlight of my life. I thought, wow, I'm a trainer, and I looked around at all these people that I'd been looking up to, for 15, 20 years that I've been in that environment. And I thought, wow, I'm one of the family, and it's such a great family. It's such a great peer group, because when you get invited as a trainer to participate in the programs, like tomorrow I'm going to Florida for Date with Destiny. And I'm going as a trainer, and and each trainer gets a team for the program, and you work with people. And but to be part of that peer group, whenever we arrive at an event, we come from all different parts of the world. Sometimes we don't see each other for a year, but to be part of that event, we pick up where we left off. The bond is so tight, such a great peer group. We hold each other to a great standard. You're learning all the time. You're always benefiting from being in that environment, and you're always working on yourself anyway, so it's a wonderful environment to be part of. I've learned so much there.
Amazing. And let me ask you also, you mentioned the guilt and the shame that you released that day. And that is one of the questions that I wanted to ask you about, guilt and shame being the lowest forms of emotions that I'm sure hold most people back. So what's your advice, your thoughts on how to deal with something like that? How is this holding us back, and how can we break free of it?
Yeah. That day in 1999, on that third day, after the Dickens, I released a lot of what's the word? It's like a toxic energy, I released a lot of that. But then the process continues after that, and so for 20 years now, it's been 20 years about 20 years since I came across the practice Ho'oponopono, which is the 4 phrases. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. It's a Hawaiian mantra. It comes from Hawaii. It's Hawaiian huna, which is, the Hawaiian culture is a very, very spiritual culture. They believe in energy, etc., and that everything is energetic and everything is connected. And so that weekend was a major catalyst for me. But then what I did was I continued to do that every day. I continued to, I continued with the practice of gratitude. I continued with the practice of continuing to carry on forgiving myself, and that's an active process that I tell everyone. You correctly said that shame is the lowest emotion. Dr. David Hawkins created something called the map of consciousness. On the map of consciousness, shame is the lowest vibrating emotion. In other words, for anyone who's watching or listening to this, what that actually means is that the frequency or the emotional vibration of shame is very, very low, very dense. And so trauma that creates shame, when it's unhealed, then it manifests in disease. And this is what we're seeing now with more and more people around the world, because of the fact that more and more people are, we continue to mask our shame, or continue to cover it up with all kinds of things that offer very short-term validation, short-term gratification. We are constantly being manipulated as consumers to buy certain things, because if we buy certain things, it'll make us feel better about ourselves. And that's what people are doing. They're placing their emphasis on the wrong things in order to feel better about themselves, rather than looking within and saying, okay, cool, what is it that's really making me unhappy, and what's really triggering my anger or my frustration and my sense of guilt. There's a lot of guilt that people carry around, guilt and shame. Guilt because they feel they've done something wrong when they were much younger, and they're not even sure what it was, but it's kind of in the unconscious. So to answer that question, to continue to release and continue to allow yourself to process your trauma. This is something that you have to continue to do with yourself all the time. So if you take the average person who looks in the mirror, without even knowing it, they have an unconscious charge in their nervous system, because they don't like what they see, because they've been told certain things about themselves when they were younger, or they've been programmed by society that to look a certain way is the best way. And if you don't look like that, then you don't really fit in, right? And you're not accepted, you're not loved. And because when we were young too, we learned something unconsciously, which is inaccurate. And we all form a false premise or a false idea around love. So when we were young, we believed that love came from our parents, love came from other people. And when our parents didn't love us, and there were moments, lots of moments, all children go through moments where they believe their parents don't love them, because they either weren't picked up at the right time, or they weren't fed at the right time, or their parents scolded them or spanked them or put them in the bedroom, or told them to sit on the naughty step and keep quiet. And so when a child is good, then it gets love and affection, and it gets recognized. But when a child is not behaving the right way, then parents don't recognize the child in a loving way. So what we learn unconsciously is, oh, if I'm good, I get love. If I'm not good, I don't get love. And we carry that into adult years. And so what we're all trying to do as adults is to be accepted and feel like we can, we'll make it, and we'll fit in. So all of that is affecting us. So in order to continue to release that, you need to really recognize that we are all little children inside, and we all need to remember that we are all little children that are craving love, and perhaps we didn't get that love that we felt we deserved, or perhaps we got something that we felt we didn't deserve when we were young. So we need to remember that actually that healing, self-healing, and forgiveness, self-forgiveness is a continuous practice. It's like a child that continually needs to be praised or loved. And I just want to make something very clear. That's not about telling a child all the time, hey, you're the best, you're amazing, because that's also not very healthy, because then a child grows up thinking that everything is easy. It's really just about recognizing, just about being loving, being kind to yourself. You can never be too kind to yourself. And people are not very kind to themselves. People are very unkind to themselves generally, but you can never be too kind in terms of how you treat yourself in a loving way. So it's really just about recognizing that there's a child inside of you that really needs to be healed, and really needs to be reminded that actually you're okay, you're enough, you are loved. And you're not going to get that from anybody else, so you might as well give it to yourself. So what I've been doing for 20 years is I've been looking at my reflection all the time, and now I carry on my phone, I've got 3 or 4 photographs of myself at different ages. One photograph at about 18 months, one photograph at about 2 or 3 years of age, one photograph at 5. And I look at those photos. I've been looking at those photos for many years, and looking at them and practicing the Ho'oponopono phrases. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. So I say to that little Allan, Allan, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. When I say I'm sorry, what I mean, and I tell people, when you use Ho'oponopono phrases, these 4 phrases, when you say I'm sorry, you're actually saying to yourself, I'm sorry that I made decisions at a very young age that undermined myself. I'm sorry I made a decision about the fact that I wasn't enough. I'm sorry I made a decision about the fact that I was naughty, or I wasn't good enough, I was unloved, or I was ugly, or I didn't fit in, or nobody liked me, or I couldn't speak, or I couldn't sing, or whatever it is, because we make decisions like that as children. We don't realize it. We make decisions like that. And it's usually around our parents, because our parents are the first people who teach us about relationship with each other and with ourselves. That's where we learn about relationship. And you either learn a healthy relationship or you learn an unhealthy relationship. And the majority of human beings are learning an unhealthy relationship because most adults have an unhealthy relationship with themselves because of what they learned as children. So we keep passing this down generation to generation. So consciousness really means recognizing that you've never done anything wrong, you know, even as a child. You were just being a child, and really just recognizing that and just continually healing yourself in that particular way. And then being grateful, you know, gratitude and forgiveness are very powerful things. Being grateful that you had that experience, because there are no mistakes. It's designed like way. So, you know, and then we just now, I know we're moving all over the place, but it just takes you into the next conversation. Is like, people say, well, what is life all about? You know, and I was speaking to an audience last night, and I said, have you ever asked yourself, you know, what life about? I mean, it's not just about, you know, being born, you know, growing up, having a job, you know, going to work every day, and then dying. And, you know, there's a spiritual curriculum that we all have as a soul, you know, that we manifest into a human body. We come from energy, we manifest into a human body. We're here for a short while. So what is life about? Life is a spiritual playground. It's a spiritual curriculum. We here, it's like a spiritual school. So we must be grateful for all of the experience that we had as kids. We must recognize that everything, even the pain, all the painful experiences, all the trauma, that's all part of our spiritual curriculum that we have come here to remember, you know, who we really are. And then once our life is over, we'll return back to energy, you know. And so while we are here as matter for a short while, we must make sure that our life matters. So really, it's just about recognizing, you know, who am I becoming, and what, you know, who would I like to become? And what is my life going to be about, so that I can make the biggest difference and have the biggest impact. And then really the biggest way you can have the biggest impact is to heal yourself, because then when you heal yourself and you have no fears and you don't worry about what other people think about you, that's one of the biggest benefits to healing your own heart, is you have no worries about what people think of you, because you're not trying to pretend that you're something that you're not, because you're afraid of what they might see. It changes everything. And then you can show up more authentically. And when you show up more authentically, it means you can be more present. And when you're more present, then you recognize the beauty in everything. You recognize the magic in everything. Like Einstein used to say, right? You recognize the magic in everything, because everything is magic. Especially when you look at quantum physics and you see how everything is connected, everything is energy, and energy has so many different forms. You know, this couch I'm sitting on, this phone I'm looking at, you know, this, you know, the clothes hanging on the line, you know, the cars outside. This is all energy that's forming in these different forms, you know, these solid forms. But it's not really there, right? It's 99.9% space. It's little packets of information that are all, you know, forming together into these shapes. When you look at it like that, then it's mind-blowing, right? But we get so caught up in the smallest part of the conscious mind that becomes critical by nurture. And then we forget about all the other stuff. And that is our biggest challenge while we're here, is to, how can we get out of that critical mind and into the magical mind, you know, the magical part of the universe, the magical part of life. And that comes from really looking inside and saying, okay, cool. What flawed programs do I have that are running in my unconscious that are preventing me from recognizing my greatness, right?
And that's one of the things that personal development can really help you with, isn't it? I know there are many different definitions, but I wanted to ask you, what does personal development mean to you as Allan?
That's a great question, my friend, because I hear a lot of people giving personal development a bit of a kick, you know, and they look at the industry and they don't have nice things to say about the industry, because they're looking at some people in the industry. However, personal development, what it means for me, it means developing your person. That's what it means, right? You're developing the person you are, and life, whether you like it or not, you will evolve, because that's what happens. We all evolve, but you can determine how fast you evolve, and you can determine in which direction you evolve, right? And so when you develop yourself, when you develop the person you are, that means you look at who you are as a person and how your psyche was formed, how your psychology has been molded by your environment, what beliefs you've picked up along the way, what beliefs you've absorbed from your parents, your decision-making process, the things that you value, the values that we have. We all have values, but unfortunately, most people are unconscious about their values. They haven't chosen them consciously. They haven't put them in a hierarchy that really serves them and where they work together. When you ask people about what they really value, they'll give you the obvious things like, security, family, success, those kinds of things. But then, those are things that people have picked up unconsciously from the people around them or the people that they've looked up to when they were young. Mm-hmm. So developing your person really, it means, personal development means for me is like who am I going to choose to be, right? And how can I actualize my potential, and how can I recognize, my attributes and my strengths, and mm-hmm. and then also how can I recognize the things that are holding me back in my own psyche, in my own thinking process, because we all have things that hold us back. We all have fears that we've picked up, and fears are learned. No child is born with any fear. When a child is born, it has zero fear. It learns fear from its environment. Mm-hmm. It learns fear of speaking out. It learns fear of offering opinion, because we often shut children down when they're young all the time. We tell them to keep quiet. We tell them that they shouldn't speak out. When often you'll say something, sometimes you can see the embarrassment in parents when their children speak out, but those kinds of things, it causes us to shrink a little bit, just a little bit. We shrink a little bit more. We shrink a little bit more. We shrink a little bit more. And then we suddenly find ourselves in our 20s, in our 30s, and we're not expressing ourselves with freedom, And so personal development means like, how can you discover who you really are and what your strengths are and what you really love to do? And when you develop yourself in certain areas, you find out, oh, wow, you can express yourself. You do have a voice, you can speak out. You have got an opinion, you do have certain strengths and attributes that you can apply in different areas. That's what it means for me, really.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And how do you think that personal development connects with spirituality? Because for me, it is pretty much the same thing, differently expressed. But what's your thoughts on that?
And I love that you said that. It's the same thing for me, my friend. Mm-hmm. I coach people in 5 areas: their business, their finance, their relationships, their health, and their personal development. Mm-hmm. But ultimately what it comes down to is their spiritual development. And the two are the same thing for me too, because, just like I said earlier, we come from energy, we return to energy. Mm-hmm. This body that we're using while we're here is just the vehicle for the energy inside. Mm-hmm. The energy behind the eyes, that's who we really are. So when people say, who am I? And they say, well, I'm Allan, or I'm Aggie, or, I'm Jill, I'm Veronica. I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm an electrician, I'm
identities. Yes,
exactly. These are identities that we formed in the world that we live in, because we've been told that that's what we are. Yeah. However, those are roles we playing. So the energy behind the eyes, for me, that's who we truly are. The eye, which is the connection to everything around us. So spiritual development and personal development are the same thing for me. It's really about recognizing, okay, cool. What is this life about? While I'm here, why is my soul chosen to manifest in this body in this particular lifetime? Because, if we do come from energy, and when you study quantum physics, there's no denying the fact now, all the scientists are agreeing the same thing. Everyone's coming around to the same ideas now. All the experts are saying the same thing. Everything is energy. Everything is connected. Yeah. I read a fantastic book recently, Aggie. Brilliant book that I recommend to everyone. If you've heard of it, I don't know, but it's called Frequency by Penny Pierce.
No, I haven't heard of it. Mm-hmm.
Brilliant book, man. Brilliant book, Frequency. And she talks in the book about, everything has a frequency, and unified field theory, which means we all connected all the time to everything around us. The entire universe is made up of the same energy. So if this is true, then we obviously come from this. We have this energy source. We come from it. And then while we're here, we have this short time in this human body. People think they have a long time, but it's a very short time, and it goes by like that. And then we're going to return to energy. So while you're here, if you're in personal development, then you must also be developing your spiritual understanding. I heard Russell Brand say last Tuesday at the NAC in Birmingham, where I spoke, Russell spoke after me. Fantastic mind. He has brilliant guy. And, you know, he said, this is what he said. He said, I don't truly believe that you can be truly successful unless you have a spiritual practice. And whatever that is for you, you must find that. It could be, you know, going to church, having a faith, praying to God, whatever it is. For some people, it's meditation, whatever it is. But I would agree with that. And I would agree with that. Because this is something that I've been doing for a long time too, for the longest time. I remember in 1999 when I was at Life Mastery in Hawaii, and I had this amazing spiritual experience, and this turtle popped up right in front of me out of the water, and it was just unbelievable experience. I remember at the time I was sitting next to a waterfall. It was a beautiful man-made resort, absolute paradise. It was 2:00 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I was in Hawaii for this 9-day program called Life Mastery with Tony Robbins. It was only 2 months after my first UPW in Cardiff, Wales, where I had this amazing experience. And I'm sitting there, and I started talking to God. You know, I went to 2 Catholic schools as a kid, and I went to Sunday school, but I was never really, you know, I didn't really like religion. It never really made me feel comfortable. Yeah. And so when I came out of the military, I began to study religion, because I was very conflicted. I was very conflicted about the fact that I'd been to Catholic schools, and I'd learned about the 10 Commandments and etc. And, you know, and then I was in the military, and I was in Angola, and I performed I did what I did, and I was carrying that with me. So having had that amazing experience at UPW after the Dickens process, and then after those 4 days, radically changing my life, you know, deciding to stay sober. I went to UPW 4 days sober, and after UPW, I changed everything. I became a vegan. I stopped eating meat, stopped drinking Coca-Cola, stopped taking cocaine, stopped smoking, stopped everything. Yeah. And now 2 months later, I'm in Hawaii, and I'm standing by this waterfall, and it's 2:00 in the morning. It's a beautiful night. There's stars everywhere in Hawaii. The stars are so close, as the air is so clean in the Pacific Ocean. It's just no false light. And I just started talking out loud. I said, hey, God, you know, it's been a long time since we had a conversation. And by that time, I'd done a lot of reading, and I had developed my own philosophy around what God is for me. God is an energy, universal love. God doesn't have a gender. God is not a man or a woman. God is just universal energy, and shows up in different forms called human beings, as well as every other form on this planet. It's all this amazing consciousness, this energy. So I just started saying, hey, God, it's been a long time since we had a conversation. And I think the last time we spoke, I cursed you. And, you know, because for a long time I hated God, you know, and I hated, you know, life really. And so we had this conversation, and I said, listen, you know, I'm in this beautiful place, Hawaii. I've just had this amazing weekend, you know, 2 months ago with Tony Robbins. Now I'm on Hawaii. And I said, you know, I do feel like I'm transforming really, really rapidly. And I'm having these amazing insights, and I'm really starting to forgive myself and understand, you know, the nature of my experiences, and understanding the nature of life, and connecting all the dots. And I said, I'm ready to go to the next level, you know, and I want to develop a great relationship with my higher self, which is what God is, right? Your higher self, your God self, the highest part of you that's connected to everything and each other. And so I said, I realized that I cannot take that next step until I really, you know, really forgive myself for what happened in Angola, and ask the soldiers that I killed in Angola to forgive me. And I would like to invoke the spirits of those soldiers now to come and bless me and forgive me. And Aggie, I tell you what, man, the whole place, it felt like the whole place started vibrating. The colors got bright, and it felt like someone came behind me, and I was sitting on the bank of this lagoon with a waterfall next to me and the hotel on the other side. Absolute paradise. But the whole place started vibrating, and it felt like someone came behind me and wrapped a blanket of love around me, right? And I just began to cry. And I began to sob, and it was tears of gratitude, and I remember, and as that happened, the water below me, the surface of the water about 3 feet below me, the surface of the water broke, and this turtle, his head came out the water. The turtle's head came out the water, and he looked straight at me, the turtle, and he took a breath. And then he disappeared under the water, and it was like I've got goosebumps now.
I've got goosebumps, and I'm just listening to it. I mean,
and,
wow.
It was like a confirmation for me, you know, from the universe saying, hey, you know what? We heard your prayer. You know, here's a confirmation. And then I just began to cry, and I cried and I cried. And it was like tears of gratitude, and then it was tears of release, you know. I had like a realization in that moment. I realized that actually everything is perfect. Everything is unfolding perfectly. Everything has a reason. There's always a reason for everything, and everything is connected. And then I've had many experiences like that since, many, many very powerful spiritual experience, what I can only describe as a spiritual awakening, right? Awakening to the next level, like an expansion of consciousness, And so 20 years later after that experience, and having read a lot about spiritual development and spiritual psychology, and, and reading about things like, the purpose of the soul, etc. Reading people like Gary Zukov, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra, all these people that have spoken about, the consciousness of the universe, and our role here as spiritual beings in human form. I've come to my own personal philosophy, and I have an absolute conviction that everything is perfect. Everything is unfolding perfectly. There are no accidents. Everything is connected. There's always a reason. Sometimes you only realize the reason when you look back. However, when you are spiritually awake and you are aware of your connection to everything, and that there's no accidents, and you have the intention when you wake up in the morning and you do your spiritual practice in the morning, which is what I do every morning, because I think it's important. And I encourage all my clients and everyone who's listening to this, I encourage you to spend the first morning, or the first part of your morning, as soon as you wake up, is to connect with yourself and to connect with your greater purpose, or connect with the universe, or whatever you call it, whatever that is, praying, gratitude, journaling, whatever it is, but just really connecting and asking yourself the bigger questions, like, what is my day going to be about? How can I show up? What that means is then you can radiate your sacred self out when you go into the day to everyone you meet. And what that means is you can be more present, right? And then when you're more present, what that means is you're not in your head. You're not having a conversation all the time about tomorrow or yesterday. You're present, and your mind is not distracting you. And then you have more peace. And that's what we're all looking for, is peace of mind. And that's what peace of mind is. That's what enlightenment is. Enlightenment is the light inside you becomes brighter, and the darkness inside you, recedes, because the light is, and that's what Jesus Christ spoke about, Jesus Christ, the reason, Christ, what is Christ? Christ is the light. That's what Christ means. And charisma means the light within, right? To be charismatic is to be enlightened. And that's what Christ demonstrated, was a human being who was exceptionally enlightened, because he understood the power of unconditional love. Even in the face of fear, and even in the face of being crucified, he still was able to forgive and be loving, and understood that everything is connected. There's no accidents, and that he would be returning to the light from whence he came, from the energy from where he came. So that is a great demonstration for us. And 2,000 years later, we're still talking about him. Unfortunately, I was having a conversation about this yesterday, and I really respect people's faith, and I believe for us to all get on well as human beings around the world, we need to respect each other's faith, and I do. However, I did say to the person that I was talking to, he asked me, "Am I a Christian?" And I said, "No, I'm not a Christian." I said, "But if Christian means being kind and loving, and recognizing that everyone is my brother and everyone is my sister, and that we all one family, and we all oneness, we all this same consciousness expressing itself in different form, then I suppose that makes me one." However, I'm not a Christian from the point of view that I don't believe that the only way to experience God is to go through Christ, or go through Jesus, because you can find God wherever you are. I can go stand outside here in the forest. I live on the edge of a forest here, and I can go and hug a tree, which is what I like to do every day. As often as possible, I go and walk in the forest. I can put my arms around that tree, and I'm experiencing God right in that moment. I don't need to go to a church and talk to a priest to experience God. You don't need an intermediary to experience God. And this is what more people are recognizing now. You don't need an intermediary to experience God. You can experience God directly. Everyone can experience God. What is God? God is love inside of you, the energy that connects all of us. That's God, right? Not somebody who sits on a throne that's going to judge you one day. That's a man-made idea of God, because that comes from fear. And that's what people are so afraid of. People are afraid of God. People say they're God-fearing. Why would you fear God? I've even seen people on their Instagram or their Facebook, right? God-fearing. I say, why would you fear God? God is love, right? Why would you fear that? That's who you are at your essence. And when you can really recognize that, that helps you to be more compassionate. It helps you to be more kind. It helps you to be, more gentle, more peaceful. because you're not in conflict with yourself then. And the only reason that people are in conflict with each other is because we're in conflict with ourselves, So when we can align all of that inside ourselves and we can find peace within, we can find peace everywhere. Then we can be a blessing to everyone we meet. Now, It's not easy. It's not easy because your ego mind is going to trick you all the time into separation and into me. I'm the best. My way is the best way. My way to God is the best way. My God is better than your God. Which is what we've been talking about since the beginning of civilization. We've been killing each other because of that very fact, right? It was tribal in the old days. Now it's, it's national now, it's like, it's nations, but it's the same thing really at the end of the day, it's all about that, right? It's just about this difference, and this thing that there's a hierarchy, and that, you need to go to a priest or you need to go to church, right? Church, the best church in the world is your heart. That's the best church in the world because that's where the kingdom of God is within you and all around you. Even Jesus Christ said that in the Bible. The kingdom of God is within you and all around you. And wherever you can find God wherever you are, right? If you are looking. And I came across this phrase a long time ago where somebody said, God is in all the details. And I love that, it's God's in everything, it's consciousness. And really, and even the word God is, that's in itself, that creates a polarity for people, because people have all kinds of ideas of what God means. I use the word God as God, which means good, orderly direction, which is how the universe flows, right? But if you want to, and sometimes I use the word universe or consciousness or the divine, or as Emerson and Edison and Einstein and all those great minds used to say, the infinite intelligence. That's another way of saying it. But this whole thing about about my God is better than your God and religion, that's a man-made construct. And we have to mention that in this conversation because of the fact we talk about spiritual development. Spiritual development is recognizing that you are energy and everything is energy. And it's about really being able to tune into that energy, that energetic flow that is in you and all around you so that you can tune into it. And what separates us from that is this idea that we've done something wrong, that we sinned, that we are sinners, we're born sinners. I don't agree with that. When children are born, they're innocent. They've just come from source, right? They are so innocent and pure. It's once they get into this world that we start, putting all of our ideas on them and projecting our fears onto them as parents and the environment they're in. And then before they know it, they start developing this, these paradigms about the fact that they've done something wrong, etc. And that, that's, all of that. That's a very interesting conversation. It can go
absolutely fascinating, Allan. Yeah,
fascinating conversation. But it is. Religion is a man-made construct. It was initially designed for power and control.
Yes,
power
absolutely.
And control. And if you take the Catholic Church is the richest organization in the world. It's the richest organization in the world. They got the biggest collection of art. They got the biggest collection of gold. They're so rich, right? But it's a hierarchy of power.
Yes.
And it's about controlling people. And then the average person in the street thinks that they have to go into church and they have to bow down, etc. And they have to ask for forgiveness for the things they've done wrong. And that's what separates them from themselves. Because really, what they need is to recognize that everything they're looking for is inside of them. Everything we need is within us. That's not just an affirmation. Everything I need is within me now. That is a truth, right? That is an accurate truth. Everything I need is within me now. All the understanding I need, all the wisdom I need, all the answers is within me. But you need to get to a higher state of consciousness to be able to access that information. But when you can do that, then you access a whole brand new understanding of the world. But that means forgiving the ideas that you have about yourself, letting go of the ideas that you have about yourself, that you are missing something or you're lacking something or you're not good enough or you did something wrong or you made a mistake a long time ago that you don't want anybody to know about, or that you're embarrassed about the fact that you may have had something done to you, and that brings into question things like abuse, child abuse, etc. There's so many people walking around who have been abused physically as children, and they don't want anybody to know about it because they're so ashamed of it, But these are the things that we need to recognize, that we don't have to be ashamed of those things. We need to learn to heal those things and accept that it happened and forgive ourselves and forgive, the experience, so that we can understand there's a spiritual context to that. Because then what happens is then you really take yourself to a higher state of consciousness, and that really changes everything, right?
Thank you, Allan. This is completely fascinating, and I'm going to, because I'm aware that of your limited time, and I don't want to use.
I don't even know what the time is at the moment.
I don't know. You got into the flow of the conversation. Absolutely. I will just say a couple of things. One is that I had made let's say at least some notes about 10 things I wanted to ask you about.
Ask me, let's go.
I probably asked you 3 of them, so
if you want to ask me some more, I'm going to give you short answers.
No, actually, I'll tell you what I'll do. I have some quick fire questions because I would like your thoughts on that.
Okay, great.
But I would love it if we arrange at some point to do a part 2 of this, because I would
love to. Yeah, I would love to.
Me too. Thank you very much, brother. That would be awesome. All right, so let me go with the quick fire.
Maybe we do part 2 face to face. That would be amazing.
That would be brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. It's a deal. Right, so just a few quick fire then, all right? If you could go back in time to your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give that Allan to change his life?
I would tell him, doubt yourself less, take chances, don't be afraid. I was very afraid at 20.
Yes.
I was afraid of life, in my 20s. Yeah. I was afraid of other people's opinions. I used to be in my head all the time. Even as a teenager, I was very self-conscious. I was teased about the fact that I had this ugly nose. I was told I was ugly from a young age. So I grew up really in my head about what other people thought about me. Whenever they looked at me, I was very self-conscious. I didn't like the person I saw in the mirror, because I believed, when you tell a child enough times, it's like anything, a child is very impressionable at a young age. Yeah. So I would tell myself, don't doubt yourself. Don't be afraid. Take chances, yeah.
Thank you. And if you had a magic wand and you could change something in the world as it is today, what would that be?
Wow. To be honest, I don't know if I would change anything really, only because of my spiritual belief that
everything is perfect,
unfolding perfectly, and that the contrast that we live in, people say, well, wow, but there's so much pain and there is a lot of pain and suffering. However, what that gives people the opportunity to do is to transform, because you cannot transform without the contrast of what's missing, right? And it's a conversation that really triggers people a lot, because people are they've got very, very strong arguments about what shouldn't be and what's wrong and what's right in the world, right? And yeah, so I think that's my answer. I probably wouldn't change a thing because of the fact that, and people look around now and they consider what's happening right now in terms of, the challenges with climate change, especially the new report that just came out now that everyone's talking about, about gas, and about greenhouse gases, etc., and all of that. Yeah, sure. We are living in a very, very interesting time, if for want of a better word. We are kind of on the precipice of extreme change, right? And there's a transformation that needs to take place. But we must remember that civilizations have come and gone before us, right? And we will not be around forever,
Yes.
It's just the way of the world, right? The world has been around for millions and millions of years, this earth, right? The galaxies have been around for millions and millions and millions of years. We are here for a short time. If you consider our civilization has been around, people argue between 2,000 and 7,000 years, depending, they just recently found a civilization that dates back 7,000 years. So, that's a short time, man. It's such a short time, after we finish, I'm going to send you a paragraph, because I can't. It'll take too much time to find it now. But
Okay.
what it does is it takes the universe and it breaks the life of the universe down into a single year, and then you really see,
really?
oh my gosh, how short a time we've been around.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't change anything really. I would just leave it as it is, because then what we have is we have the opportunity for us to really, for the ones who are waking up and saying, okay, cool, this is the opportunity that I have now to transform myself and to transform the people around me.
Thank you. And one more, looking back at the last, say, year or so, any big mistake that you made and you would like to share with others to prevent them from making the same mistake themselves?
In the last year?
Or so, yeah.
No, I've had at the beginning of this year, I came back from Date with Destiny last December from Florida. I got back the middle of December in time for my daughter's birthday on the 17th of December. I got back about the 15th, and I looked ahead towards 2019 this year, and I looked at my calendar and I said, wow, what a great year I have, right? I had an event every month, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. I had lots of international travel all booked in. The whole year was booked. Just like my 2020 is already mapped out already. I've already got bookings in 2021. And that's where I was last December. However, when I came back, I had to renew my UK residency. And so I proceeded to go through that process. There were some complications and I ended up getting grounded in the UK and I could not travel. So I had to cancel my event. So it turned into a nightmare. What was looking as an amazing year became a nightmare, and I had to start canceling events, and it cost me a lot of money and I lost out on a lot of income. It was really, really, at the time, I was freaking out about it. However, at the same time, my best friend was fighting lymphoma, and I was able to be there for him regularly, visit him regularly. I would never have been able to do that had I been traveling. So when I got to August, and my passport only came back from the UK Home Office in August, so I had been able to travel for 8 months. And my first trip away this year was on the 13th of September to Russia. And but I remember looking back, in October, my best friend passed away on the 3rd of October, the same person. And we had been friends for 32 years. And it was really, it broke my heart to lose him. However, at the same time, I knew that he was out of pain and he's at peace now. But looking back, I thought, wow, that was actually what I thought was a nightmare was a blessing, because I was able to spend that time with my friend. So it's turned into an interesting year for me, and now I've been traveling nonstop since September. I would say, to answer that question, I'd have to look back a little bit further. And I've made a lot of mistakes. However, those have also turned into great lessons. So what I would say to answer that question, the best way I can answer that question, Aggie, is to tell the listeners and the people who are watching this is, there's no real, you can't really make mistakes. You can only learn something. If you can look back and look at the things that you thought were a mistake and ask yourself that question, what did I learn from that? What can I learn? What was the gift in that experience? It reminds me of what Napoleon Hill said in his book, Think and Grow Rich. Every adversity, no matter how big or small it is, every adversity, no matter how painful it is, no matter how much money it cost you, no matter how much you lost, it has the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. And if you can find that seed, and sometimes it's a tiny seed, but if you can find the benefit in that experience or the gift in that experience, there's always a gift, there's always a benefit, then you can turn that into a great lesson for the future. And then there is no mistakes, there's no failures. You can only learn, right? So yes, I've made a lot of mistakes, plenty. And I'll continue to make mistakes. However, I've trained myself whenever something goes awry or something unexpected happens, or something like this year when I was unexpectedly not able to travel, I did ask myself, I said, what's the lesson here? What can I learn? How could I have done this differently? What is the blessing? I kept asking myself, what is the blessing of this experience? And then I realized, the blessing is I can spend time with my friend, I can really support my friend in the last months of his life, and support his family, support his wife, support his kids, So yeah, I think that's the way I can answer that question.
Thank you. No, I completely agree. There are the phrase goes that I never lose. Either I win or I learn. But
absolutely,
yeah, the term mistake is wrong. Anyway, Allan, how can people connect with you? Where would you direct them if they want to find out more about you?
I would direct them to my Facebook page or my personal profile on Facebook. On my Facebook page, if anyone goes to my Facebook page, I've got something there called Rock Your Mondays. There's a sign-up button at the top. Rock Your Mondays. Every Monday morning, I send an audio message directly to your Facebook Messenger inbox. And if you click that sign-up button and you go through the opt-in pages that will open up after that, then you can be into the Rock Your Monday morning message. You'll love that morning message every Monday morning. I don't believe in, I think Monday is a great day. Actually, I don't like the words Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You know, I prefer the word today. Like you said at the beginning of this conversation, today, it's always today.
Yes.
However, most people don't like Monday. So I've created something called Rock Your Monday Morning. So you'll get a direct message, audio message from me. So you'll hear my voice, 90 seconds roughly, sometimes a little bit longer. I would direct people to that page. I'm often posting stuff there. Sometimes I do live videos, live broadcasts. And also I'm posting stuff there about, you know, workshops that I have coming up and that. Or they can follow me on Instagram. I don't have a large following there. I was very late to Instagram, although I do enjoy it. I also have a LinkedIn account and a Twitter account. I was reminded last night about the fact that I haven't used my Twitter or my LinkedIn for a long, long time. I need to visit my LinkedIn account again. But yeah, all the usual social media platforms, or they can just Google my name, Allan Kleynhans, and my website is allanspeaks.com, so they can find me on Google quite easily. And yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that, Aggie.
Allan, I really appreciate your time sharing your knowledge, your passion, enthusiasm, everything. It was, I don't even know where the time went.
Yeah.
It
Thanks,
was in a flow, and it was incredible. Thank you very much, brother. That was an amazing conversation. I wish you all the best, and we'll arrange that part too, all right?
I look forward to it. We must definitely do that. We'll do it. Let's do it in January.
Absolutely.
Awesome, bud. And yeah, I wish you all the best, and may 2020 bless you, brother.
Thank you very much, Allan. Same to you. Thank you.
Thanks, brother. Stay blessed.
Thank you very much for listening. Please take a moment to subscribe, rate and review this podcast on iTunes, Spotify or Stitcher. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in.